Cassidy Hutchinson's damning testimony as the key witness to the House January 6th committee revealed a series of stunning insights into Donald Trump's actions as the attack unfolded, and shocking details about the former president's indifference to the violence that day, including threats to his own vice president, Mike Pence.
I remember Pat saying something to the effect of, "Mark, we need to do something more. They're literally calling for the vice president to be effing hung." And Mark had responded something to the effect of, "You heard him, Pat. He thinks Mike deserves it. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong."
Now, as Trump pursues a second presidency, Hutchinson is using her experience to sound the alarm about the former president. She calls an extreme threat to democracy. And joining me now is former Trump White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson, author of the New York Times bestseller, Enough. Congratulations.
Thank you, Troy.
I love that. I'm very glad it was a bestseller because it means that people actually care about your insights more than just your testimony. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
You're very open in this book, and you talk about your journey from being a committed supporter to being horrified by what's happening. So now, as you look at what is still happening, and Donald Trump saying things like he's going to be a dictator on day one, how do you experience that, and what are your biggest fears?
Well, to start with that, I want to be careful because I do agree, and I have been very vocal about talking about how if he is reelected, it is a step towards a dictatorship in the United States. But since I have last discussed that, he has come out and almost made light of it. And I was on the inside. I do know how Donald Trump likes to message, and he messages about things when he's afraid of them. This is speculation, but I'm very pressed to believe that he sees that this messaging is working, that people are believing it, and it's reaching an audience, which is the right thing to do. We do need to sound the alarm bells on this. We do need to bring attention to it, but we need to do it in a responsible way, because if we don't, then he's going to continue making light of it and amplifying this rhetoric when it's extremely dangerous. Everything that Trump says is extremely dangerous. He has said extremely dangerous things for years that have gotten people killed. And as we reach this next election cycle, I truly believe that if he is reelected, then the likelihood that this is the last election that we are voting under our Constitution is very, very likely. All of that being said, Donald Trump has showed us who he is, and he's told us who he is for a very long time. At the end of the administration, he talked about implementing Schedule F, which is essentially a program where he would be able to fire up to 50,000 civil servants and replace them with loyalists.
Right.
If reports are accurate, there are also groups that are putting together databases of Trump loyalists to backfill those positions. So right then and there, we're already looking at a government that is going to be completely stacked with new government employees that aren't tenured and people that are inherently loyal to Donald Trump. That is not what our country is based upon. Now, that's one element of it. And then, he's also facing 91 criminal indictments. He could still be under trial. The trial still could be underway in this next election cycle. Or they could be settled, and his first act in office could be a self-pardon. Right. So we're looking at so many different angles of danger here, and I just think that the more that we talk about this, the more we amplify this, it's extremely important. But we also need to keep in mind that most Americans need to be educated on this and to open up the conversation about what this actually means and how it does very closely resemble a dictatorship at this moment.
And I mean, it's a really important question because everyone, a lot of people watching the show sort of already believe that, right? They're already fearful of a second Trump term. But there are a lot of people who aren't and who felt, well, we made it through the first term. They're really not afraid of having a second term. Jamie Raskin gave testimony about this moment that you talked about in your closed-door testimony about the kinds of people who were gathering inside of the Oval and ensuring that they left. These are the kinds of people who would be. Let me just play it real quick. This is Jamie Raskin.
Here are text messages sent by Cassidy Hutchinson during and after the meeting. As you can see, Ms. Hutchinson reported that the meeting in the West Wing was unhinged. The meeting finally broke up after midnight during the early morning of December 19. Cassidy Hutchinson captured the moment of Mark Meadows escorting Rudy Giuliani off the White House grounds to, quote, make sure he didn't wander back into the mansion.
the very kinds of people who are being described as unhinged would be the administration. And I would anticipate that Donald Trump would probably release from prison people like Enrique Tarrio, people like members of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. They would be back on the streets. Is that something that you think about? And that's probably what would happen, no?
I do agree with that. I agree that he would bring in people who are extremely loyal to him and people who are arguably dangerous people. The Enrique Tarrios, the people that are associated with the Proud Boys and extremist groups, you know, I don't want to give them oxygen because they are just, that's such a long conversation that we could have hopefully another day.
Yeah.
But there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that Donald Trump would bring in people that he knows are loyal to him and that will not say no to him. He will bring in people at a senior level, mid-level, and even entry-level employees who are not going to push back on him, who will not defect, who will not speak out, and who will not shed light on the dangers that Donald Trump and his administration poses. And just branching off of that briefly too, you know, as we look at this next election cycle, it's not guaranteed at this moment that he will be the nominee. We still have time and there's a few months until the primaries. However, we also have to think about when we are talking about the election, talking about what is happening in Congress.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that there are responsible people elected to Congress because Congress holds the agenda. So if he succeeds and he is elected president and there's a Republican majority in either or both chambers, it's already filled with a bunch of members of Congress who are yes people to Trump.
Sure.
They would need to sustain the majority, which means that more would need to be elected.
Right.
We cannot be electing people who are dishonest, who do not stand for the Constitution, who do not stand for our rule of law, and will continue this momentum towards this dictatorship or this populist movement that Trump has latched onto. We need to return to normalcy and we need to return to normal governing practices.
That is excellent advice. Listen, sometimes you got to take advice from young people. You're a young person that was inside and you know this man and you know these people. Cassidy Hutchinson, thank you so much. And I'm glad you wrote this book. And I hope everyone who has not yet read it will read it. Thank you.
Joy, thank you for having me.